This is the best of First and Last, the podcast, with Mike Golic Jr. and Robin Lundberg.
The Rockets move on, defeating the Thunder last night, 4-1 in that series, which means, Mike, we say goodbye to one of the great all-time individual seasons in NBA history put on by Russell Westbrook.
We say bye to that. We say bye to some of the best postseason sound, post-game sound that we had come our way not too long ago. It seems like just yesterday, Robin.
Well, we had some good post-game sound last night as well. I mean, we can honor Russ's memory with that post-game sound. I'm looking up at his outfit. It cracks me up. You know what?
It's one of those things we didn't realize what we had until it's going to be gone now. It's going to be no more pregame Coachella outfits anymore, no more contentious post-games, no more fourth-quarter hero ball, and we're going to miss it.
Well, this version of Straight Talk, then, will be in honor of Russell Westbrook, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, half the cost, and it has to do with the end of the game and the way the series actually unfolded. And I think the series a bit of a microcosm of Russell Westbrook's career and the way he is judged and the way he's very polarizing for a player who is as fun to watch as he is. And one of the reasons is the volume of shots that he can take and the way he can sometimes shoot the team out of the game a little bit late in the game. His counterpart for the Houston Rockets, Patrick Beverley, had this to say.
But now it shocked me because he looked up and said, "No one can guard me. I got 40 points." I'm like, "That's nice." He took 34 shots to get it. I mean, no, I'm not up here trying to bash anybody, but I mean, you know, men lie, women lie, but the numbers don't. Collectively, as a unit, we've done a great job on them. We try to make them shoot a lot of tough shots, and the numbers show.
Some salt in the wounds right after there.
Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook, the author of a hilarious exchange during that game that produced a whole new host of internet memes with the face that Russ lobbed back his way when Patrick was barking at him. They both got served technicals after that game as offsetting technicals after the exchange. But like a lot of these playoff series, it's gotten very contentious. Again, coming off a regular season where you wonder if guys even want to be out there half the time with the rest conversation that we always had. And now you get to the postseason, and we've seen that level of on-the-court contentiousness in pretty much every series. We've seen guys coming back early from injury now that we'll get to later potentially. But they left it all out there last night. Russell did, and Patrick Beverley's was a star this series. He was a guy that, with his effort, being one of those ancillary playmakers, especially when James Harden was off the court, was invaluable.
Yeah, he's a 3-and-D player, right? Who's also a guard who can handle the ball, which makes him super valuable. Sort of the Draymond Green of that team, but from the small position. Here was Russell Westbrook's response.
Russell, things got a little contentious between you and Patrick Beverley. Can you talk about, kind of what happened there?
Oh, yeah, he was talking about he was first team all defense, but I didn't know what the hell he was talking about because I had 42 at the time. The series, I don't know what he talking about. Maybe he was dreaming of some I don't know. Sorry, excuse my cuss word, but I don't know what he was talking about, but I guess he wanted to be first team all defense or something. Maybe he was dreaming about it. I don't know.
Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable networks. But really, Mike, that exchange says it all right there to me. And Russell Westbrook obviously has a chip on his shoulder, more like a brick or a boulder. And when you see him play, you see it. It's evident. He plays with fury. He plays with passion. It's jumps off the screen. Sometimes it can go a little bit too far to the other end. And this is a career thing, not just in this series. But at the same time, he's so valuable to that team. And there seems to be this notion that people can't accept, in my mind, that both things can be true. Because I'll give you two pieces of data, right? How's that for data? Two pieces of data. One is going to be shared a lot today, and that is the way that the Thunder played with Westbrook and without. They were actually plus 15 on the court in the series when Westbrook was on the floor. They were minus 58 when Russell Westbrook was off the court. So obviously, He is vitally important to their success. His presence on the court is a must. They have to have him on the court.
He is the only thing they've got.
But at the same time, you look at the way he's played in the fourth quarter. I think sometimes, it's his natural tendency, but also he sees the lead go away, and then he overcompensates when he comes in. Because for the series, in the fourth quarter, he missed 35 of 49 shots. 35 of 49 shots.
Well, there's also something, too. So Russell Westbrook played, I forget how much, but it was up over 40 minutes last night. I forget how much into that 40-minute well, but I'm pretty sure I saw a stat last night where during the regular season, you didn't have that happen once. It was a volume of minutes he wasn't used to in succession for this series in a way that, of course, was going to add up. For as much as we joked about rest, there are situations, especially in these short bursts like this, where you're asked to do as much as he is and you are as vital, where that absolutely can become a factor.
And those other guys are role players. I mean, the one guy on that roster who maybe was brought in to be able to do a little bit more is Oladipo, who was bad last night, didn't really have a good series at all, was 4 of 17 from the floor. The rest of those guys are nice pieces. Nice complementary pieces. Steven Adams, Taj Gibson, Robertson, who can't hit a free throw.
Oh,
but as far
that was hard to watch, man.
Maybe he should try underhand or something. As far as a defender on the perimeter, he's excellent. But I brought this up the other day. What you're looking at, maybe the bench could be shored up a little bit, is a team that is in glaring need of another playmaker and shooting. But we cannot have a conversation about the Oklahoma City Thunder without recognizing the fact that this was a team that had Kevin Durant also. Like, we've known of them as Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant. And there was always the argument who was more valuable, or is Russ taking away from Durant? Did Durant shrink in the big moments? Did Russ shoot them out of the game in the big moments? Either way, to have those conversations, you had both of those guys on the team. And that was a championship-level team, like a team that competed for the NBA championship, and you removed Kevin Durant. So all you have left in that sort of role is Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, you were in one AD. You were in year one after Durant at this point. So now every year after that should, in theory, get easier in building this basketball team around who you've got left, in the same way that a team like Houston has built their team around James Harden and put him with shooters that help him when he can drive the lane and kick out. The same thing we've seen with LeBron James, and you hope that gets better for his sake. From a strategy standpoint, though, last night, because you mentioned, I think it's true, where Russ is human and he sees, all right, we've got this lead. I think there was a 6-point lead early in the fourth quarter, late in the third. I forget exactly where it was. But he sees that lead and then sees it completely burnt to nothing when he's off the court in a very short instance of time. Do you have a problem with Billy Donovan taking him off the court during that time, understanding just how fragile that lead was?
I think everybody needs to sit down, or you talked about the minutes he played anyway. I mean, the legs are just going to come out from under him. I don't know what you do if you're Billy Donovan. I'm looking at their roster, right? What's the one thing they could try? I guess you could try Cantor, who can score as a big man, and try to play that way when he's on the bench, but Cantor can't defend at all. So there's just not really a good answer, because otherwise, you're going to say, did you totally wear the guy out where he had no chance to play at the end? He played 42 minutes in the game. I mean, you can't play the whole game and do it effectively the way he played. I just don't think there's a proper response. So really, what it boils down to is this. You can be fairly critical of Russell Westbrook, but no matter what he did, no matter how well he played, even if he made every right decision, ultimately this was a limited team, and their run was going to come to an end at a certain point, and it probably came to an end when it should have.
Yeah, this is probably the ceiling, and you heard it. You heard the tone. You heard I heard Royce Young talking about the team in the locker room after, and it wasn't a team that seemed dejected. It wasn't a team that seemed like it was really going to be haunted by this. It was a team that probably understood that to an extent. But man, when you watch the rest of that team out there on the court, I don't know if it was because they can't or because they won't, but there was a whole lot of people spitting the bit out there. It looked like hot potato just to get the ball away from any of their hands and back into Russ's, because no one else was confident enough in what they could do with that basketball.
And that's also how you get conditioned, right? You get conditioned to play that way, because I've never seen a player control the ball as much as Russell Westbrook did this year. So those other guys get used to playing off of that. And then when you remove that, whether he's on the bench or whatnot, it's not easy to just go back to playing like a normal team in a normal situation because you played that way all year.
I'm surprised we didn't see more phantom passes to no one out there that went straight out of bounds. Like, oh, I thought Russ was going to be there.
No doubt.
First and last, the podcast.
I always feel super important, Mike, when I get sent the DVD screeners as a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and it says on the little piece of paper, for your consideration, right?
Oh, yeah. Someone's taken the time to offer this up. They value your opinion in theory so much.
In that first segment, we had a couple of sound bites for your consideration. Patrick Beverley versus Russell Westbrook, right? And there, if we were doing a selection of best soundbite from the NBA playoffs or best post-game presser, it is a tough field this year. I mean, this is an all-time classic.
And in the first round, like this is round one, and we've already had Fizdale from Memphis, who I think is at the top of the charts. He had the rant that was, punctuated by a phrase that's on T-shirts now. You had Jimmy Butler questioning if Marcus Smart was about that life or not, which spawns a whole separate discussion, which is awesome. And then you had last night Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook going petty for petty.
And we're going to have a montage of all the first-round sound after the first round is over. Everybody loves a montage, we know that. But for your consideration, we have Chris Paul versus Reporter because last night the Clippers fall to the Utah Jazz. The Jazz have Rudy Gobert back. The Clippers do not have Blake Griffin. Joe Johnson continues his late career renaissance. And after the game, a frustrated Chris Paul was asked about the prospects of a Game 7.
Will the Clippers be back here Sunday playing a Game 7?
What?
Your feeling about, your level of confidence that you'll be back here again.
What you think? I'm on the team. What you want me to say? No, it's over. I mean, that's what you want to hear? Yes. Come on, man. You've been doing this long enough. Seriously, right?
If you can expand upon that.
No, I don't know. Everybody in here laughing for a reason.
All right. If we're going to continue with the Oscars theme here, Fizdale's rant, that's La La Land. That just felt like me watching Moonlight right there. Like that one's got a chance because it was so snarky, so snide, and clearly had the rest of the room on his side there. He won in the court of public opinion.
Chris Paul, by the way, in this series, averaging 27, 6, and 10 on 53, 44, and 92 splits. But it doesn't seem to matter. He has the highest player efficiency rating over the last 3 postseasons of any individual player, and he's going to be labeled a loser if they wind up losing this series. It's better for the NBA as far as a competitive series goes, I believe, if the Jazz move on. They are deep. They are balanced. Somehow they've decided going to Joe Johnson down the stretch of the game is how they're going to get buckets. That's what I thought. What are they missing in a series against a top-tier team? It's the guy who can create for himself, and Joe can still do it, apparently. So they match up much better with Golden State. The Clippers are food against Golden State. That series is over before it starts because, just look at their starting lineup. They're starting Maurice Spates and Luke Baumute, and look who's coming off the bench. Austin Rivers is all of a sudden a hugely important player to that team. They're just too thin when you get beyond Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan, really.
Take important. That for data.
Hugely important 2 points last night. Mo Spates with a resounding 1, and that was at the half. I heard Charles call him out in auto-tune at the half for having 1 more point than he did, and clearly Mo responded to that criticism with a resounding goose egg in the second half. But you're right, in Utah, Gordon Hayward back from his bout with food poisoning and looked good last night, 27 points for him. Gordon Hayward, the ultimate poster for money does change people. That guy's, haircuts pre and post money are a resounding note for that column.
What's odd, though, is you don't really need money to get a good haircut. Maybe it's where I live. I don't know, because I could get at least what I think is what looks like a very professional and high-class haircut, including the tip for $20.
Oh, you say a $20 tip?
No, including the tip. All in. $20.
Okay.
I'm leaving $20.
Including the tip. Yeah, listen, I think there's always just that difference. Like I've said, right now as we come up on the NFL draft, my favorite thing about watching this is going back and looking, because there are certain teams that require guys in college to wear suits on road trips or on game day, and seeing what guys are able to make work with what they've got in college versus once they get that paycheck, what the outfits start to look like. It's my favorite transition. That's Gordon Gordon Hayward's hair. That's him figuring out, wait, I don't have to live like this anymore. I've got it now. And now all of a sudden I can look like Gordon Hayward, slick back 2017.
And there are different, levels of broke. One level of broke would be cut your own hair broke, right? Other than people like you.
Yeah.
You can cut your own hair, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if you wanted to, you could.
If I wanted to, I choose not to.
And it makes you feel like there's more of it if you go to the actual place.
Well,
right?
someone slighted me because I went to a Supercuts the other day to do it, and I saw a bunch of people around here, and they're like, you can't go to Supercuts. I was like, I got 7 hairs. The fact that I'm paying someone to cut my hair at all is laughable. Why would I go to like a salon or something realistic like that, man? You know what they got? They got a 1. They got a 1 overall at Supercut that can more than enough get me there.
You know what? That's so funny because I saw your tweet about Supercuts, and in the back of my mind, I have to be honest, it wasn't me, but I was thinking, oh, somebody's going to say something about Supercuts. And I never even thought I don't think about you being like a bald guy. I guess with, all my bald friends, I don't really think about it. I'm not preoccupied with it. But generally people who are, think about it a lot. So, it's just that whole story is amusing to me. And I, side with your logic and reasoning that the person who cuts your hair does not need to have some sort of really fancy certificate.
Yeah, I don't got to look at the degree on the wall from your beauty salon school, or you can be a beauty school dropout and cut my hair. It's okay. I understand that I exude a personality that gives me Gordon Hayward hair in your mind. That's just what I got going, but not the real.
And they have coupons for like $4.99 haircuts.
I'm saying, man, I'm out here balling on a budget.
888-729-3776. Is it acceptable to get your haircut now? What do you think of Russell Westbrook's season this year now that it is over? Because, this is the time. We're going to move past it so quickly, right? If there is a day to sit back and put into perspective, in the phrasing everybody loves to use, right? Russell Westbrook's season this year, how would you describe it? Like, if you were to put it into one, we won't do one word because that gets you in trouble. One sentence.
I mean, I can do it in hyphenated. I would say all time. I mean, we saw an all-time great individual performance from a guy who, like we've mentioned multiple times already, suffered a seismic loss to their team structure and said, okay, put it on me. And we all talked about it before the season. We all said this is going to be the Russell Westbrook scorched earth tour, and he's going to go back through and he's going to let everyone know he doesn't need any help to do it. And my God, he went out and did it. He went out and accomplished everything we could have ever wanted for him and more.
What about switch sides on me, now you're about to meet Westbrook? I mean, that lyric kind of sums it all up, right?
Yeah, listen, there's a reason he was included in it.
First and last.
I'm shocked at all the results. I'm just here to play ball and do my best to stay healthy and stretch as much as I can. So if people keep thinking I'm on stuff, like I'll be here every day. I have lots of blood and urine, so whatever. It's all right.
Eric Thames offering up his blood and urine.
This is another quote for your consideration. I feel like we've got to lump it in because anytime you're mentioning blood and urine in the same sentence, I'm usually here for it.
Don't know what to do with that exactly.
No, yeah, take that for what you will. But
transition.
An all-time quote from Eric Thames.
11 home runs for him, and he set a franchise record for April homers for the Milwaukee Brewers. He now has 4 more games to challenge the Major League mark, which is 14, set by Albert Pujols and Alex Rodriguez, respectively. Now, the word narrative, Mike, gets thrown around a lot. Narrative, the way we describe, we want to put a season, a legacy in context. But we really had a legitimate narrative constructed by the staff of this show regarding Eric Thames.
We came into it with so much promise. This idea that... So Eric Thames, for anyone who's not familiar with his career path, initially had a pretty ho-hum run in the majors with the Blue Jays and the Mariners. Years ago, 2011, 2012, he was a 2008 amateur draft pick back in the day, and then went over to South Korea for... It was 3 seasons overseas, JBT? 2 seasons overseas in South Korea, hit 348 over there, 124 home runs in 388 games. Was a beast over there and came back over, and his game is now translating back there, at least the early returns. But we come in this morning and producer Dan's like, yeah, got this guy Eric Thames. He's crushing home runs right now. He went over to South Korea and changed his name because we used to call him Eric Tims. back in his original stint in the majors, and we're like, wow, what a cool wrinkle to the story. The guy goes there and quite literally reinvents his whole identity in South Korea and comes back ready to rock, ultimately to find out that's not true.
Yeah, from my limited experience with Eric Thames, I'd always sort of known his name to be that, but I took producer Guy Dan's word for it. He apparently was going with the pronunciation of Marcus Timms, I believe. Thames is the way I like it to be pronounced, but I did like the idea of that, right? He goes over and he comes back with a new name. Because sometimes people are hesitant to call somebody something else. So, when Ron Artest changed his name to Meta World Peace, a lot of people, I'm not calling him Meta. Whatever, you can be called what you want to be called. My son Raj has only been wanting to be addressed as Kong the last several days. So to me, he's Kong. As long as he'll go to bed. If I call him Kong, I'm cool with it.
But see, like the upside has to be there like that. Like this one, Thames had the cool backstory. If he did go and change it, your son being called Kong is awesome. I will only refer to him as Kong now, out of respect for his wishes. You mentioned Meta World Peace, great name after just being Ron Artest. I can get down with those. It's Mitch Trubisky wanting to be Mitchell now, or my old teammate Tommy Reese wanting to be Tom now that he's a coach. That's not how the game goes. Either have it be something awesome, either be Frankenstein from Big Daddy, or be your normal name.
Now, another story out of the baseball world is also the ownership group that apparently is about to buy the Florida Marlins, or the Miami Marlins, I guess they're called now. They did change their name. They now go by the Miami Marlins. And that ownership group is Jeb Bush, who is the ex-Florida governor, of course, the famous Bush family there, and Yankees shortstop Derek Jeter. Noteworthy because it's Derek Jeter, and he's such a big name. But you brought up something before the show that I really didn't think of, and that's that the sport you played, those guys see somebody who used to play, regardless of how long they played for, and them hit ownership and think, oh yeah, that doesn't really happen in our sport, or it's tough for our sport.
No, when you think about it, because as we were kicking around examples and comparisons for this, the overwhelming one that comes to mind is Michael Jordan going into ownership in Charlotte, and the understanding that it's just a different level of money. And we see it happen every offseason. It's blatant, even in the context of the normal year-to-year for each sport. But now seeing these guys being able to go on, where we talk about Peyton Manning, who made a ton of money playing in the NFL, as an all-time great, very much in line with Michael Jordan and Derek Jeter. But we talk about him, maybe he'll go into working in the front office like a John Elway or one of those types. Never really broaching the idea of, would he be in line for ownership stake, because it's just a different length of money that you're dealing with.
And Jeter and Bush and the rest of that group submitted a bid of $1.3 billion. Are the Miami Marlins worth that price?
You know what? Like I always say, and this comes up every offseason, you're worth what someone's willing to pay for you. So the Miami Marlins are right now worth absolutely that price. We'll see if by worth it you mean they can be a competent baseball team, even with an all-time great like Jeter at the helm, because that's where this gets interesting is, now how does this translate? Because we talk about Michael Jordan, who hasn't had a lot of success in this realm, and we see it hit or miss all the time with players or coaches trying to transition into those other roles. You've got guys like Larry Bird, who was an executive of the year. You've got the dumpster fire of Phil Jackson in New York. And I guess I wonder, like, outside of being that petulant the way Phil has been in public, is there anything Derek Jeter can really do here besides help his legacy? Like, if he goes and turns around the Marlins, it's a feather in his cap. But if they're exactly what Charlotte's been under Michael Jordan so far, it doesn't really diminish his greatness in any way.
I don't think so, and he gets to hide under the group premise at that point, right? It's not just Derek Jeter. He's part of a group then.
How entertaining that he's part of a group with Jeb Bush, too. Like Jeb Bush, please clap Jeb Bush, and Derek Jeter, one of the all-time. We know his off-the-field escapades are well documented, so you've got those guys theoretically in the same room, tidy whities and boxer briefs all in one.
Well, Derek Jeter, he was always very calculating in a sense, because the assumption was, here's the way I always put it, the assumption was that he was a great guy, right? Like, and I assume he's a great guy, but it was because you only judged him by what he did on the field, because he gave you nothing to go off the field. He never said anything. It's not like he was up there going on these missions or whatever, so we knew he's out saving babies somewhere or whatever. It's just he would never answer a question, never get himself into any sort of controversy in that regard. So what do you then judge him off? His play on the field, which was always exemplary. The way he carried himself on the field was always exemplary. And if you look at his post-career so far, post-playing career, a lot of people mock the idea of the Players Tribune. It seems to be doing pretty darn well.
Seems wildly successful. We've seen enough news broken on the Players Tribune, and just in general, so many athletes in this day and age take to it as a means to tell their story. So you've got all that in mind, but that's a good point because he never made that glaring public mistake. He was like that tennis player that was just going to always get it back over the net to you and let someone else make that mistake. And so now you think about the parallels for where he's going to be. And we don't know what role exactly he's going to have in running the franchise and of ownership. And there's still a process this has to go through with Major League Baseball, and the offer has to get made, all these things down the line. But they won the bid to negotiate exclusively, essentially, is what this is. But you think about having Derek Jeter around there day to day. That guy navigated New York City, the biggest market in the country, for the entirety of his career. Is there anyone better equipped if you're a kid coming up in that clubhouse to walk up and say, "Hey, Derek, how'd you do it? We're in Miami, a place with very similar nightlife options and outside things that could get you in a lot of trouble. You've got a guy that's uniquely conditioned to tell players coming up now on that team, hey, this is how you get around some of that."
His career over in baseball, but his post-playing career, it looks like Derek Jeter will continue to be in the limelight, just maybe not at page 6 as much.
First and last. Wednesday on Mike and Mike, Tim Legler on the NBA playoffs, Mark Schlereth and Sal Palantonio on the NFL draft, plus beef stew with Stugotz. It's Mike and Mike, starting at 6 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN2.
Continue to just double down on ridiculous Stugotz promos for Mike and Mike.
I have no idea what that means.
I think that's become the theme for all of the Stugotz promos. Is they clearly have no idea how to handle it. Because it started off, I think they heard us. You remember the first one we heard, it just said, "and Stugotz." Like it gave a little tidbit for everyone else who's coming on the show, and they didn't know. The other day I heard one that said, "and Stugotz with whatever he wants." And now we've got beef stew. Now we've got a name for the jumbled mess that is Stugotz.
First and last, Robin Lundberg, Mike Golic Jr. You can join the show on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, 888-729-3776. Choose Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline for the best total engine protection you can get. Am I crazy, or did...
Yes.
Okay, but yes, I said that was like a lob, right?
Couldn't resist, sorry.
No problem. Correct, also. Am I mistaken in believing that Rajon Rondo was announced as out for the playoffs, or at the very least out for this series like 2 days ago?
Last I checked, that was the news I've heard, and apparently we were all fed some fake news.
Yeah, because he hopes to return for the Bulls and soon. I love when it says clandestine workout. The Bulls guard, Rajon Rondo, according to Mark Stein and Mark Spears on ESPN.com, held a clandestine workout Tuesday night in Boston in an attempt to determine if he's healthy enough to return to the court for Wednesday's pivotal Game 5 against the Celtics. So tonight, his arm was broken. Last we heard, he was in a cast. He's done, and now the cast has been sawed off, and he is trying to get back on the court.
So it was a fracture in his thumb and some ligament damage in his wrist that before was season-ending, and then now all of a sudden, now that it looks like the season might end a little sooner than really they had readjusted their hopes for, because it's a Bulls team that came out of the regular season sort of limping in, that we weren't really sure was going to be this team. All of a sudden you readjust those expectations after coming out of the gate strong, and it's like, does it hurt that bad? You start looking around and wondering, because we've clearly seen that they are an entirely different team with him off the court.
Well, we have seen Rondo basically play through a elbow knocked out of place or whatever happened. Remember the skirmish he had with D Wade back when the Celtics and the Heat used to go at it all the time when Rondo was teamed up with KD and Allen and Pierce. I guess that means he's about that life. And that was the big controversy after Game 4 when Jimmy Butler had this to say about Marcus Smart.
I think, that's the first time. Last time, too. We're not going to sit here and get in each other's faces like that. Like I said, he's not about that life, so he's calming down.
Meanwhile, Marcus Smart, his retort?
I ain't got to talk about what I am about. No, I just show you. I can show you better than I can tell you. So, like I said, it ain't hard to find me. You heard him. He said, I don't think Marcus Smart's about that life. Last time I checked, if you're going to say somebody about that life, you should know, right? All right, so, but like I said, we're going to keep this Chicago Bulls versus Boston Celtics, not Marcus versus Jimmy.
So there you have the response from Marcus Smart, which leads into a very compelling Game 5. I know, and I don't mean this to be cheeky or mock you, because there was reason to believe this. You had picked the Bulls to sweep this series after it was 2-0. The reason I'm asking in that context is, now who do you believe wins the series with it at 2-2?
I think it honestly hinges on Rondo, because I think even having the shadow of Rondo out there, because we know, all right, this guy was supposed to be out. So if he's coming back, you're not getting the whole version. But does having that IQ out there, does having that potential passing ability, it's not like the jumper was ever really there, help enough to sway this back? And I think with him on the court, I might still give them the edge. But if he's not playing, or if he goes out there and clearly is a detriment to them because of how hurt he is, the Celtics are going to take this.
There's some fascinating careers on display in this postseason. Joe Johnson is one of them, to me, where he was considered the underrated guy on the Phoenix Suns. People forget he was on that Suns team with Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire, and I wonder what would have happened if he had stayed with them and Sean Marion. He goes to Atlanta for the big payday. People criticize him for saying, oh, he's just out for himself to go for the big payday. Becomes a all-star every year for the Hawks, a team that gets bounced early in the playoffs usually and are mocked for their isolation style at end of games, hence the nickname ISO Joe. Then he leaves Atlanta, has a stint in Brooklyn where he hit some big shots for them, and all of a sudden the ISO Joe moniker becomes a compliment to the point where Garnett called him Joe Jesus then, and now he's doing the same thing with the Jazz. So he's like underrated, overrated, underrated. Rondo is another one. Rondo was, at times, you could argue the best player on the floor in some of those big-time series where he could do everything out on the court except for shoot the basketball, but a wizard passing it, defense, all that stuff, rebounding. And then he became a bit of an albatross and a malcontent where he wore out his welcome everywhere he went, partially due to he would butt heads with his coach because he wanted to do everything out on the court, but also as the league moved towards the spacing and the shooting, that became more of a detriment because he was scared to shoot and even sometimes scared to take it to the basket and score, where he'd pass off when he had easy layups. Now all of a sudden we're back to full circle with him, because even though he doesn't fit perfectly with the Bulls in that construct playing next to Wade, because of his IQ on the court, they need him just because he can get them into the offense. It's just amazing to see. Maybe it's the relationship with the coaches, because Rick Carlisle is a guy who's had a lot of success and is tough-minded and strong-willed. Not to say that Hoiberg isn't, but he doesn't have that pedigree. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know what it is, but it's crazy to me now that we're saying Rondo is swinging a series again.
Yeah, I think a lot of times it comes down to, with players, we see that fit matters, and that's not to remove all agency from Rondo, because a lot of his ills throughout his time with those different teams were absolutely owned by him. He had a lot to do with what went on, but at the same time, if you can get into an environment, and I think so, it forced his hands. This year was kind of a crucible for this team where it took a lot of adversity to bind them in a strange way. They had to really butt heads and fight it out before they could come together, and oddly enough, he ended up being the unifying force, which I think is as surprising as anything.
Here was Steven Jackson, our ESPN NBA analyst, not surprised that Rondo might try to take the floor.
I'm not surprised. He understands what's at stake. He understands this team needs him. The last two games, it was obvious that they were hurting at the point guard position. He knows how to fight through pain. He understands that he needs to play, and if he can fight through that pain and get out there, he's one of those guys that'll do it.
Really, I guess it's just about, can he handle the basketball? Because you're not worried about his shooting touch. If we were just talking about, I mean, Rondo, he actually shot okay from three this year, a very limited number of attempts, but historically he's been a very poor three-point shooter, and his field goal percentage overall was just at 40% this year. So that's not what you're looking for from him. You're looking for him to operate the machinery a little bit.
Yeah, and usually the line of questioning is, can we make this worse by him being out there? Because in theory, all right, you're selling out to try and get back and win this series, but would the potential ramifications be enough to keep him out in the next round, in which case you're right back to where you're sitting. So the answer to that must clearly be no enough to where they're willing to throw him back out there because you play hurt. Usually that's the mantra is you can play hurt, not injured. In some cases, you might have to play a little bit injured.
Well, there's some of those injuries, too, that you can make worse. I suppose he gets hit on that hand. Obviously, he could make it worse. But as far as just the act of playing, a break isn't something that generally is going to get worse. Like if something was almost torn, and then you go out and you tweak it more, you could actually tear the ligament. As we delve deep into the physiology of the sportsman.
First and last on ESPN Radio.
You never heard Nelly Furtado's album Loose? Timbaland did most of the bulk of the production. Bangers across the board.
Robin Lundberg, big Timbaland guy.
Definitely. I mean, right up there amongst the greatest composers of all time. ESPN Radio presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to pick a price that works for you.
Producer Dan Z almost just lost his mind on that one.
If producer Dan Z were to look up Timbaland tracks over the course of his career and then cross-reference them with songs he likes, he will find himself surprised.
Please don't refer to him as a composer.
Why? He composes music.
Because that term is left for people like Mozart.
Well, Timbaland is much better than Mozart. Play a Timbaland track and then play a Mozart track and tell me which one's better.
How many bangers did Mozart have? I'll wait.
Yeah. Is he the one with symphonies, or is that Beethoven? Beethoven's famous for naming them symphonies, right?
Beethoven was laying down symphonies left and right.
Dun, 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 dun. When somebody first heard that, the faces they must have made.
That's what I mean. Like, that was like Jay-Z with the bucket head over his face in the room. Like, Beethoven's like, oh, my God, did you hear that track Beethoven just put out? Eat.
Everybody's got to come to the studio to hear Beethoven's got. Dun, 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 dun. Like, Beethoven's about that life.
First and last.